Welcome back to 3-Point Firefighter. Today's guest is Chief Scott Thompson. Now, Chief Thompson joined the Volunteer Fire Service in 1981. He began his paid career in Plano, Texas in 1986. Over the course of his career, he has worked with several progressive fire service organizations. Chief Thompson is passionate about suburban fire operations. So much so, he literally wrote the book on it. It's called The Functional Fire Company, Positioning Small Groups for Success and Survival. Chief Thompson has been a hands-on workshop and classroom presenter at the FDIC since 2002. Chief Thompson is currently the fire chief in the Colony, Texas Fire Department, and he owns and operates Functional Fire Company LLC and fireserviceleadership.com. So sit back and relax and enjoy my conversation with Chief Scott Thompson. Today's podcast is sponsored by Fire Facilities Incorporated, expert engineers, designers, and manufacturers of steel training towers, burn rooms, and mobile units that are all made in the USA. So, Chief Scott Thompson, thank you so much for being on my show. How are you doing tonight?
Great. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's an honor. It's an absolute honor. You're one of those people that every firefighter knows, right? So, and that's true. So I want to go into a little bit about this. So what I did was I have my own group on Facebook, a private group called 3-Point Firefighter. So I decided I wanted to do a fantasy fire department. So I came up with a chief, deputy chief training and on down. Right now we're all the way down to the last thing we did was 3 sergeants. And how it works is anybody in my group can toss out names and suggestions, and whoever gets the most suggestions gets the position. So This year, rather by a large number, you have been appointed the fire chief of the 3-Point Firefighter Fantasy Fire Department. Congratulations for being the first one.
I am truly honored. And when I see the rest on there that are part of the staff, man, I should be the janitor.
Well, I think it's great that you've made such an impact on the fire service to where people immediately start throwing out your name. And I think you're known for a lot of things, but one thing that gets me about this is I really get to talk to fantastic firefighters all over the country, but there is a minimum amount of actual fire chiefs, not like chief officer, deputy chief, blah, 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 but actual fire chiefs that get their hands dirty, that are just absolutely going around the country changing the fire service, and you're definitely leading that pack. What exactly has gotten into you?
I've been doing this a long time, coming up on 40 years, and I've worked for 6 different fire department agencies. So, my greatest asset is just that I've had a lot of exposure. I've worked with some iconic fire service leaders. I've worked with or get to have conversations with some of the best firefighters on the planet. And so, I'm not doing anything but kind of taking everything that's been taught to me that has made an impression on me and kind of putting it into terms that I hope will influence people and provide some insight. And then kind of be there for support. One of the things that I'm very passionate about is trying to give some stuff back, either in the form of like the mentoring package that I put out, or at any one time I'm mentoring some people. And, so many people have invested in me that I just want to give it back, and I really do. But I think probably the reason why if you had a lot of fire chiefs on your site, I'd been dead ass last.
I doubt that.
No, I would have. But, early on, I had to kind of make a decision when I was writing the book. And some of my mentors said, kind of always picture who you're writing to while you're writing. And so, I can't do anything about those men and women that are chiefs today. They've decided their leadership philosophy, their operational philosophy, they're going to do what they're going to do. And God bless them. I hope the best for them. But I'm really trying to focus on the next generation of fire chiefs, the ones that'll be coming up in the next 5, 10, 15 years, and really trying to invest in that group of fire service leaders and company officers and battalion chiefs. But I think that's kind of probably what's it. There's just not, you can probably count the number of fire chiefs that you have on your social media. There's probably not a lot. And I just kind of, just kind of want to invest in that group. I love firefighters. Both my sons are firefighters. All I've ever wanted to do is be a fireman. So to me, I'm just kind of following a natural progression of starting at the bottom and getting to a position where if I have a stage, I want to put a message out there and I want it to be something valuable. Hopefully that'll lead people in the right direction.
Well, I like to always say to you Texas people, I got my start in Texas as a firefighter up in Wichita Falls.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. So my son was actually born in Texas, so I'm sort of a Texan by transitive property, I guess. But I love the state. Don't get me wrong, but there's so many fantastic, just badass firefighters from Texas, right? So you, Mo Davis, David Craig. Let's see, Jacob Johnson. It goes on and on. So I always like to ask, what's in the water in Texas that is making such good firefighters? But with you, I got to ask something else. You work with Justin Fraze, or he works for you. What's in the water at the Colony? Not just Texas, but the Colony.
No, great guys like Justin Fraze. I'm so blessed. I'm just so blessed. We're in a great area, and we were kind of the underdogs for a while. And I don't know how much time you want to spend. We talked a little bit about culture, but sometimes the stars just have to align. When I got to the Colony, the city wasn't doing much, and then we had some huge investors come in and really invest in our community. But we just have a group of guys that get it, and they're passionate about the job. They're fun to be around, and I think it's just all of us. It's certainly a team effort. I've known Justin for a long time. He's probably worked in as many departments as I have. Goes way, way back. And so, he kind of understands my philosophy about things. And then, you got the just so many, the Travis Hardens and Sandy and Garrett Rice. And, those guys attract those other – it's not me. It's not the fire chief. It's those guys in the firehouse that are attracting other like-minded firemen. And that's all I can say. I just kind of sit back and watch.
Well, I think what's great about this is, you've written a book, you go and do tons of conferences, you do hands-on, you do lecture, you do everything. And I assume, and tell me if I'm wrong, it's not because you're trying to buy a Lamborghini, it's because you are trying to give back to the industry that's given you so much. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I don't even know how to spell Lamborghini. And this is not a good thing. I would certainly recommend, but I don't have an exit plan. All I've ever wanted to do is be a fireman. And, one of the reasons I'm doing 40 years is before I took the Plano test, I was sitting in my car. I talk about this in my classes, and I prayed to my God, and I said, give me a job and I'll do 40 years. And so we're approaching that, but I'm having this, and I know this is going to sound weird, but I'm 61 years old. I'm having as much fun as I've ever had. Now, I loved riding the rigs and I love going to fires, but, things change as you get a little older and your level of influence. And so, I don't hunt, I don't fish, I don't golf. And so this is it. And we all that love this job have an obligation to give back in whatever form that is, whether it's articles or hosting a podcast or, putting together the bro file or whatever it is, putting together articles. We all have that obligation, if we love this job, to give back to this job. And I'm just so incredibly blessed that some big names in the fire service way back kind of took me in a little bit and shared some things with me and gave me an opportunity to kind of ride their coattails for a while. And so now I need to do something with that. If I don't, then all that's wasted, and their investment in me ends there. So that's it's simple. And I think all of us that love the job have that obligation. Anybody can do 20 and tap out. And I'm not saying those are bad people doing bad things, but it's what you do during that time that you get to walk into a firehouse each morning, hang your gear on a rig, and go out the door when the tones go off.
I say the same thing. I always say that, the fire service doesn't owe me anything. I owe everything to the fire service. I know what you were thinking. You were looking at me and you're like, you got a haircut today. And yes, you'd be right, Chief. I got a haircut. So how does this tie in? I'm glad you brought that up. Perfect segue. So I'm getting my hair cut. I'm at a new place getting my hair cut. And the guy's asking me, he's doing that, the basic stuff like, so what are you doing today? Blah, blah, blah. And I had my fire department shirt on. I was off duty, but I just left. And he goes, this is so weird that you just said that. He goes, so what do you like to do for fun? What do you do for a hobby? And I had to stop for a second. I go, well, I mean, I guess just fire stuff. He's like, fire stuff? I'm like, yeah, I mean, I like, I like doing a podcast. I like going to classes and training. I said, I guess that's my hobby. I mean, it never really occurred to me. I don't hunt. I don't fish. I do like to golf when I can, especially if I got, an abundance of curse words built up. Golfing's the best way to get them out. But he asked me that. And it just kind of struck me out. I'm like, my main job is really my hobby. On my time off, like now, I like talking fire shit. I just do. It's just me.
So you're in the same boat. And I golfed for 25 years, but I found out all the time I was on the golf course, I wanted to be doing fire shit. So I said, well, I gave up golf. But golf. For the generation coming up, though, you do need to have something else, I think. Hobbies are important, and this job is getting to a point where you got to be able to step away from it. I certainly encourage my boys who, like I say, are firemen to find other things to do. Nobody ever told me that. So like you say, this is my career, my hobby, my passion, my second wife, I've got the one at home and then, the fire. So it is what it is. And it's been great to me. It may kill me early, but it's been great. I wouldn't change much.
No, it's the best job in the world. I always like to say on my podcast, I feel bad for fighter pilots and astronauts because they don't get to be firefighters.
Right. Yeah.
So yesterday, I live about 2 hours away from Cincinnati, and I live about an hour and a half south of Indy. So I got a good little area to go to. So I drive up and I take this class from a guy, and I don't know if you've heard of him, Corley Moore. He teaches something called the 9 L's. So I go and take this class yesterday, and blown away. I got his book, love the book, love the class even better. He's an amazing person. My favorite podcast is Weekly Scrap, and I can't help but notice that your name is mentioned on his book. You wrote the foreword. So tell me a little bit about that. How'd that come to be?
Man, I love Corley. Everybody does. I haven't met a person yet that doesn't. And you talk about somebody who invested, I feel like, I'm giving 10% where he's giving 100% back, but it goes way back. I never heard of Corley, and he called me, when I start right after the book came out and just kind of started teaching. And he said, hey, I'm doing this program up in Oklahoma. And, Brian Brush did the foreword to my book. Yeah. And so Brian is right up there. And I didn't know Brian really well when I asked him. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. So Corley invited me up to do I think it was a 1 or 2 day conference with Brian Brush and Mike Walker, the assistant chief from Oklahoma City. So that's when I first met Corley, and liked him right away, man. Just such a cool dude. Him and his wife Amanda, just great folks. And we kind of kept in touch. And then I think he called me to do the scrap. I want to say it was episode 26 or something. And I didn't know much about the scrap at the time. And so we did it, and we have chemistry. And so, we kept in touch and seeing each other in conferences and bouncing ideas off of one another. And he told me he had this idea of writing this book, which is absolutely awesome. And I think because of our, knowing each other over a while and sharing this philosophy, I was truly honored when he asked me to, that's a big deal. Mike Gagliano said this to me. A lot of people talk about writing a book. A few less sit down and start it, and then there's a very, very small amount that actually finish it. So I appreciate the amount of time that Corley has put into this. So when somebody, it's a form of your life work, asks you to do that, I took it very seriously, and so that's kind of how it came about. I think Corley respects some of the stuff that I've done. He likes my stuff on culture and some of that. And so we just, it's, those people you just have chemistry with, and,
right.
and you almost can finish each other's sentences because you think the same about this job that we all love. So that's really, what it is. As a matter of fact, I'm doing another scrap Friday night. Tomorrow night, we're doing another scrap. So
that's right.
been on the scrap a couple times, and we did the first mega scrap, and just, but all these are good. Each podcast kind of serves a different function and a different audience. But that, I wish I had a more dramatic or a sexier story than that. But just it's just a huge honor and something that I just took so serious. And I tell you, Corley, that guy's attention to detail, and he gets stuff done. What a productive guy. And so it was just a real honor, just like it was a true honor when Brian Brush said yes when I asked him to write the forward in my book. And Brian is a fire service icon, just as Corley, and they're going to be doing great things when I'm buried and pushing up flowers.
Assuming you're going to be pushing up flowers. I mean, maybe somebody might just throw you in the garbage. You don't know.
Well, that may be. That may be.
So, speaking of books, so you wrote the Functional Fire Company, positioning small groups for success and survival, right?
Correct.
So I've heard about this book. I apologize for not having read it yet. It's going to be ordered. But you know what? It's on my list. And then Corley, in his class yesterday, gives you a book list too. So now I got enough books to last me till I'm dead. And I don't like reading. Fire shit I like to read, so I look forward to reading it. Well, now this book has taken off. It has gone crazy in the fire service. It's just, everybody tells me it's the book. Got to read the book. So tell me a little bit about your book and what it's about, and where did it come from?
Well, I've always enjoyed writing. I've written a few articles for Fire Engineering magazine that were well received. I think my first article was published in 2002. So I've done articles, but really the motivation is probably, I've kind of always thought about it. When I went to the colony, I've been in the colony 14 years now, and the colony is just a great change story from going from the underdog to kind of where we are now and having some cool things and being able to do stuff. But this, and I don't recommend doing this, but I remember probably 6 or 7 years ago, I promised my wife a book for her birthday. Well, when you promise your wife a book for her birthday, every birthday after that, you're reminded. So, when I left Louisville, I guess I started taking it pretty serious and doing the research. And then I just really hunkered down to get to work on it. But to answer your question, so there was a message that I wanted to share and about chosen cultures and the power of culture, and really a book about the suburban fire service, a leadership book about the suburban fire service, kind of aimed at fire chiefs and company officers to close that gap and get those two on the same page. So that was one reason. The other reason, and I say this in my class, I only have a bachelor's degree, and the cool thing in the fire service today is get advanced degrees. And I thought to myself, I can go to a university and pay that money and read books for professors and write papers and get a degree, or I can do the same amount of work and have a book. So that was reason number 2. Reason number 3 is I'm severely dyslexic. I'm left-handed, and writing and reading has always been a struggle for me. And so this was really,
you were in a truck company then, I take it?
Yeah. Yeah. Right. That's probably where I caught it, right?
Yeah.
So this was just a huge mental challenge for me. And then with both of my sons being on the job, I wanted to kind of, I want to leave something that maybe will be there for a while. And when I'm long gone, that other people can use to help mentor and coach and take care of the next generation.
Now, how cool is that? I wonder for your kids, is it cool to say, oh yeah, my dad's, Chief Scott Thompson? Or is it like, oh, my dad's Chief Scott Thompson? I wonder which one that is. Because they got to hear it all the time, right?
They do. And neither one of them, one's in Dallas and one's in Arlington. And I think they were there 6 or 7 months before anybody ever knew that their dad was. And those are funny stories how it was called out. But yeah, they're their own men and they're doing great things. I tell you, they are so much smarter than I am. And so advanced, but you've never sat through one of my classes. But one of the things I talk about, I have a stepdaughter that's a rapper. So I think when they talk in the firehouse, it's not about their dad, the fire chief. It's about their sister, the rapper. Truth be told. Yeah. But imagine that those two combined, your dad's a fire chief, your sister's a rapper. I mean, that's almost the trifecta of firehouse misery.
Oh yeah, I can see. If it was me, I'd be putting your book on
Yeah.
like their on their bed all the
Yeah.
time, and then the rap
Yeah.
music and all that. Yeah, I can
Yeah.
see that.
Yeah. So,
So, tell me a little bit about the book. Tell me some of the guts about it. What was your main point that you wanted the reader to get? Where was you landing that plane at?
well, initially the book was going to be called Fire Service Success, the Basics. So I'm real big about trying to define success in the fire service. You and I work for two different organizations, but we share a common mission to save lives and protect property. But we probably can't agree on, I'm talking very broadly, but as a fire service, we all share a common mission, but we really can't agree on the best way to do that, right? Fog nozzles versus smooth bores versus, positive pressure, all the things that we talk about. So I really wanted to get something down on paper where we could kind of start to define the suburban fire service. And I struggled with that for probably a year, and I couldn't make it work. And then one late night, I was sitting at my desk, and I started to focus on the fire company, the small group, and everything just started to really make sense. And so, like I said, I just kind of want to, I don't know if it's a how-to or a pocket guide or a quick reference, but really just talk a lot about a lot of topics, the basics in a lot of topics. So I talk about culture. I talk about leadership. I talk about supervision. I talk about training. I talk about, being managing risk versus being safe, and just kind of really give hopefully a good foundation in each of those areas. And I always say I'll know the book is a success if somebody takes what I have done and improves on it, writes a better book than this, then that'll be something that I'd be very, very proud of. So that's really kind of the content and what it was about. You can kind of, if you're a senior man or woman, a company officer, a shift commander, or division chief, or a fire chief, hopefully I have some nuggets in there in an area that you may be interested in. If you want to change the culture or do some supervisory leadership training. I talk some about operations, and there's enough there to kind of get you started and get you going in a direction, introducing some terms and some concepts, some theories, bringing in some of the science and some data.
So you mentioned, I would definitely want to talk about culture. I'm very interested in picking your brain about culture. But before we get there, you'd mentioned managing risk and and safety. Now that, to me, depending on who you talk to in the fire service, that could be a million miles away from those two things. I tend to see them as kind of close up, and you can work with both of them, but some people want to see them as mutually exclusive. Tell me a little bit about your view on managing risk and being safe at the same time, because some people think you can't.
No, you can. And I always do this, and I did it on our Hump Day Hangout yesterday. I've got to have this intro. I got two sons on the job, and I would be perfectly okay with them being governed by the same philosophy or the same management principles that I preach. With that said, we've removed the word safe from the Colony Fire Department. We don't use it. We don't talk about it. And we replace that with being smart. And being smart is a risk management concept. So if you think about it, if you're a company officer, you're a battalion chief, right? You're a shift commander. Is that correct?
No, I'm a training officer.
Or training off, but you're a battalion chief rank, right? So if I tell you to be safe doing an extremely dangerous job, well, that's impossible. We can make it safer. We can make it less dangerous. But safety is a two-dimensional proposition. Wear it, don't wear it. Do it, don't do it. Go, don't go, right? Risk management offers multiple kind of dimensions. So we're going to go in and say, this is a dangerous, dangerous job. There are so many ways that we can get hurt or killed. Let's talk about what those are. Let's prioritize what the risks are. Let's categorize them. And then let's look at what our capabilities, your organization has certain capabilities. The colony has certain capabilities. FDNY, Dallas Fire Department, they all have certain capabilities and limitations. So as leaders, you and I need to figure out what our capabilities are, what our limitations are, recognize that there are risks, and then evaluate those capabilities in terms of those risks. And what is our experience with those risks? If I'm a department that doesn't go to the roof very often, then I don't have a lot of experience in vertical ventilation. Well, that needs to be something big on my radar. That's a very high risk, low frequency operation. So
Right.
as a leader, I need to take action to kind of close that gap and improve, our position on that. So to me, you can't make this job safe. We talked yesterday, and David Rhodes even talked about it. We need to kind of take a safety third kind of approach, and we don't ever want risk avoidance to be one of our action steps for safety. That doesn't work in the kind of job that we do. Society and a lot of our members inside recognize being a firefighter for what it is. You are trained, you are equipped to do a very, very dangerous job. And we cannot say we're going to do that safely. We can do it safer, less dangerously, but let's talk about what it is and manage risks. And so that's kind of, in a nutshell, I do a better job in the class, but that's kind of what it's all about. And when I was thinking about this, anybody in the fire service who kind of initially comes across as taking a position against safety is going to get hung in the town square. So one of my mentors, Gordon Graham, who is probably the sharpest risk manager on the planet, cares
Right.
more about our safety than anybody I've ever met.
And he's a cop. He's an old cop.
He is a cop. He is. He's from California Highway Patrol. He's a motorcycle cop in Rampart.
He's a Chips.
Yep, he certainly is. And so, I called him. He's one of my mentors. I said, Gordon, am I committing career suicide? He said, no, you're right. You're exactly right. He said, not a lot of chiefs want to talk about that, but he said, you're on the right mark. So we've kind of retrained our organization to be what we say SMART, and we use that as an acronym: strategic, managed, aggressive, risk-regulated tactics. And
I love that.
Yeah, and that's how we do business. And so I can define what being smart is, but I can't define what being safe is. You look safe up in the dictionary and it says without risk. Well, it doesn't match up.
Well, you mentioned when you were talking about this, like vertical ventilation. That's a really good a microcosm of the safety. I mean, you could throw in RIT, you could throw in, all that stuff. But I think that vertical ventilation really is a great little example of should we, shouldn't we, some do, some don't, and it's all based on safe. So let me ask you this. At the colony, do you all get up on roofs?
Absolutely. We default to vertical vent.
Okay.
So when we respond, but I talk about something in my class called a Fox box. We have hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands, of these little homes we call Fox boxes. They're 1,200 square foot, 1-car garage, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, very small, very kind of not built with the great materials and quality. And so we have to figure out how to provide the greatest window of opportunity for survivability if those things catch fire. We don't have a lot of time to screw around. And so we're a very, very pro vertical vent. So when we respond to a structure fire call, the default is we're going to the roof and cutting a hole until we're called off by either fire attack or the incident commander or operations. And we have 2 companies, our truck company, which matches up with our rescue to create a 5-person truck, and our squad. We run a heavy squad. Those are the only 2 companies that are cutting a roof, but they are our most rehearsed, most experienced at doing that. In other words, our engine guys don't ride the truck. Our truck guys don't ride the engine. So that I make sure that the people that go to the roof are the most experienced. In other words, in the colony tonight, there's no chance that I foresee. There's never say never, never say always. But there's not a chance of an engine guy going to the roof tonight. If somebody goes to the roof, it's going to be somebody who's done it very recently.
So these Fox boxes you're talking about, are these lightweight construction? Or they,
Yeah, very light. Yeah. All built after 1974. So they're the definition of lightweight construction.
So I assume you're throwing your roof ladder, or do you work off a bucket, or what do you do to make that, since we're not using the S word, we're just smart instead?
No, you can use safe. Well, I mean, so it's these Fox boxes, and I don't know what the exact pitch is, but it's not a very steep pitch. I mean, we can almost jump from the ground and get on those roofs. Though, now they're
Okay.
very poor construction, but they're very low to the ground. And our guys have enough experience. They know when they need to bring a roof ladder and when not. So those will go either way. We get up on them quick, get off. But I mean, they can jump off those roofs and they're probably not going to sprain their ankle, kind of deal. Now we go up north of our city where we have our starter mansions, and a majority of those we're going to cut out of the bucket. Those are much more challenging. And then we have everything in between. So we'll do all of those. And this is how it is, I mean, I can order them to the roof, but I don't order them on the roof. So we know that the first in trucker squad is going to split. The squad runs with 4, the truck runs with 5. They're going to split and they're going to do inside truck and outside truck. And it's up to that company officer how they're going to approach it. If we don't vertical vent, if we're going to use, the times that we do use fans or hydraulic or natural ventilation, but it's up to that truck officer to decide if they're cutting out of the bucket, if they're going to go right up, cut and get down, if they're going to use a roof ladder. That's all based on that boss on that truck company. And
from what I've read about you, you are very much all about empowering your people to make those decisions. You don't micromanage. So
there may be a few that disagree with that. I don't think I do, but they're, I don't know. I hope not.
I'm willing to bet that the people that are saying that, if they say that, are the ones that have gotten in trouble in the past.
Oh, they probably need it. So glad I'm sorry.
We do the same thing where I'm from. We do here in southern Indiana. We get up on the roof by default setting, and I think our guys do it great. They don't. We send minimum amount up. After we cut, we're down. It makes me nervous as a training officer when I see people, hanging out longer on the roof than they have to. Blah blah. But I think we do it pretty good. But what I really thought was super interesting, you said your truck guys are just only truckies ride the truck and only engine guys ride the engine. So for us, we have floaters because people take off. Well, these floaters could go on any truck at any time, and then also overtime. So if somebody wants to work overtime on the truck, even though they haven't been on a truck in 2 years, they can do it. So I like what you're saying. Is that something that was established before you? I mean, did you have to fight the union to make that happen?
Well, first of all,
I see you smiling.
No, we're a right to work state, so we don't have unions. But when I came to the colony 14 years ago, they were embracing the quink concept where everybody did everything. And I went to the first few fires and on these Fox boxes, and man, we weren't doing well. And so the drive was to say, I have a term, and this comes from Alan Brunacini's where I heard it. I didn't make it up, called the zero impact period. That's the time from when we set the parking brake till we start solving the problem, right? And so on these Fox boxes, on most residentials, you want to minimize that. If you want to create the greatest window of survivability, you got to minimize that zero impact period. You don't have a lot of time to screw around the front yard. So the leadership team came together, and that's one of the first changes that I made is we created the city's first truck company, dedicated truck company. And, early on, we had people without any truck experience. So we picked our members. My current operations chief was one of our first truck lieutenants. And so we said, we're going to commit to this. And for many years, we just ran trucks and engines, and it worked really well. And we were able to manage it to where, so everybody should be able to search, right? That's right. A firefighter skill. So we have a position where if Mike Smith, who's ridden an engine for the last 7 years, for some reason, it doesn't happen very often, ends up on the truck, then there's a position where he's going to be the inside truck and going to do search. He's not going to be on a roof. He's going to be inside searching. And it worked so well that we put a squad when we opened Firehouse 4, when we moved our truck company south. We put a New York style heavy squad in service, and we put it in the middle of town. And it can do engine work or truck work. But in order to get on that, and we try to stay as true to it, you got to spend 2 years on an engine company, 2 years on a truck company, then you can be considered to go to the squad. If you hire on in the colony, you got to spend 2 years minimum on an engine before you can really even talk about going and working on the truck, even on a temporary basis.
Wow. So brand new people that come in or laterals, they have to be on an engine no matter what for 2 years?
No, now with some exceptions. So we just hired Bryce Campbell from Bryan, Texas. Bryce was a driver of their truck for the last 10 years, right? So, I mean, he went through our indoctrination. So if they have some truck experience laterally, then we're gonna. But if they've, if they're don't have that, they're going to start off and they're going to. Now, I'm also going to say this. We got some guys. Travis Harden's one of them. Hardcore engine guys, and these guys in our system they're taking our engine ops to a new level. That's what they love. That's what they're passionate about. So I don't want to give the impression at all that our engine guys are anything less than our trucking squad. The big difference is obviously, like anything on an engine, you're working under the protection of a line. And so we want our new guys to have that comfort zone until they're comfortable with our system. We allow our truck and our squad to search ahead of our line and independent of our line. They work above the fire. So we don't want to put anybody in those positions until we're pretty comfortable with what their experience level is.
Oh, wow. Now, when you became the chief, now you've been the chief there for what, 10, 11 years?
14 years.
14 years. So when you became the chief there, what were some of the obstacles that you had to overcome? There it is again. I'm not trying to start fighting.
No. Just thinking back, it's funny. Well, first of all, we had no money. They called us the hole in the donut. The colony was called the hole in the donut. Now, we're in a great location. We're on the lake. But we're bordered on our eastern border by two of the wealthiest fire departments in Texas, Plano and Frisco. To the south of us, we have Carrollton and Dallas. And then to the west, we have Louisville. And so when I came to the colony, I mean, we were one of the lower paid departments. Our fleet was in terrible condition. If we got a fast food restaurant, we considered that economic development. So, all those things that go along with that. But we were able to retain members, and we had some great folks. And so, but that was kind of getting back up a little bit. My boss in Louisville, Tim Tittle. I worked for Rick Lasky. Rick was the chief, but my ops chief was Tim Tittle, and he's passed from cancer. God rest his soul. But when I was going to the colony, he said, they got a bunch of great guys, but on a fire, it looks like you're throwing a bunch of marbles on the ground. Now, that's just one of those things that in my mind. And so, I spent the first 6 weeks talking to the men and women of the organization. I kind of said, what do you want from me as your fire chief? What would you like to be? And one of the things I heard over and over again, they said, we just want to be respected. We have a very fluid mutual aid, automatic aid stuff, so we're always working together. And there were some senior members in this organization, they didn't feel like they could stand toe-to-toe with our mutual aid partners. And so all those things were things that we had to kind of work with. And then in 2015, we hit this huge growth spurt when Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway invested in us. And now we have what we call Grandscape, and we have high rises. We have a 2 million square foot under roof furniture store. So we have mega boxes. We have just a little bit of everything. So like I say, it's been kind of the ultimate change story of going from nothing to having all this stuff. We built 2 firehouses in the last 3 years. So that's why I laughed. Every day is a challenge. You say, what did you have? We have something called a single role paramedic position, which is very unique for our part of the country. The whole engine and truck deployment model and all those things were things that we had to examine and change to just to deliver the best service that we thought we possibly could, maximize our operational capabilities.
So when you were making that transition from whoever the chief was before to you, how important was training to transferring everything to the way you wanted to have it?
Well, I think training. So I was a training chief in Louisville. I love training. That's one of my passions. So I had a very clear vision. So they were doing what every other was doing. They would do their 4 hours a month, and it was get it checked off and move on. And one of the things that I did when I got here, I took a shortcut, and I typically don't recommend that. I kind of discourage that, but this was my 6th department. And so I took my first few weekends and I kind of purged my brain and put this vision of what I thought the suburban fire service could be down on paper. And I walked in at the time, they were my shift commanders, but they were captains. They were still working on the rigs. We hadn't had the battalion chief position, and I threw it on their desk. I think it was called the Excellence Vision and Professional Standards, the first version of that. And it was kind of just my vision of success. And I threw it on their desk. I said, listen, this isn't a policy. It's not a procedure. I said, you can throw it in the trash the minute I walk out the door. But if you want insight into my thinking on how I want to see this organization progress, here it is. And one by one, they each came to me and said, Chief, this is the best thing we've ever had. Not because of the content. I mean, it wasn't rocket science. It's just for the first time in their career, they had something that they could refer to and really explain what the end game looked like. So if we were asking people to buy in for all these changes, we were kind of able to articulate, if you do this, this is hopefully what it'll result in. So all that stuff, I mean, just kind of just a lot happening and changing literally every day. Every day was a challenge and a change with promoting. When I got here, we had 13 people per shift. We now have 30 per shift. So just a lot of craziness.
Wow. So how hard, if you love training and you love being the chief of training in Louisville, because I'm the same way. I'm a training officer. I love it. It's definitely a passion. How hard was it for you to let that go as the chief, to let somebody else pretty much enforce your vision? So like when you have your training chief, was it hard for you just to kind of keep hands off, or did you have to guide him a little bit, or him or her stronger?
Well, no, when I got here, we didn't have a training chief. So I was actively involved in training for a while. We still don't have a training chief. We have a battalion chief. He's our A shift battalion that also does training, but we still don't have a training chief or officer. So when I got here, I had a very light support staff. And so I was actively involved. Like I did our hazmat training every year. I went out and did all the firefighter survival and rescue stuff that I taught at FDIC. And I would share all the things that I felt comfortable sharing. So I've been actively involved. And even today, I have a great relationship. Chief Rice is our A shift battalion who does training, and we talk frequently. And I just gave him some what we call company preparedness drills. So we reestablish our standards. So I still feed him a lot of stuff. He manages the program, but he's the type that, he'll take whatever people are willing to give him. So I would still say I'm probably 20 or 10%, 10 or 20% of my time is still involved to some degree in training. So it wasn't hard at all to answer your question, because I think we had, we do something called a training season, which is going to start in March. And so we all kind of work on this together, and everybody kind of contributes, and there's no egos, and it's not anybody's thing. We're all just trying to provide quality daily training, whatever that looks like.
Well, I kind of wanted to touch on culture, and I feel like this is a great place because we've been talking about how you got to the colony and you had to implement your vision to where you're at today. That had to be a huge cultural change. Whether it was one good culture to another, it's still a different leader. So how do you see culture being, why? Okay, let me ask you this. Why is culture so important right now in the fire department? It's such a big buzzword, and it seems like a lot of people have different definitions.
Well, they do. And be very careful who you're bringing in to teach culture. I started to pay attention to culture as I took these journeys through these organizations that I belong to. But if you sit in my class, I put a model up, and I call it the 8 C's of success. And the first C is commitment. The second C is culture. And the third C is character. Now, what that model is saying, and this goes against every leadership book out there that says your people always come first. I disagree. I think the culture comes first. And this is why. Is we can go out and we can put all our efforts towards bringing the best people out there into our organization. But if we don't have a healthy, productive culture, if it's toxic and we bring those people into that culture, where are they going to be in 6 months? They're probably going to be ruined. They're certainly not going to thrive. So to me, culture is the most important thing. There is nothing more important than culture. One of the most important things that I do every day is manage the culture daily. I am a huge believer in culture. And with a little bump in the road 2 years ago, we went 11 years without losing anybody to another fire department organization, where we didn't have one person leave to go to another fire department. We had a little bump in the road, and we lost a couple who came to our organization and went back. But in 14 years now, I can count on one hand the number of people that have left our organization. That's because of culture. It's not because of any one person. It's not because of Scott Thompson or Garrett Rice or Justin Fraze. It's because of this culture. And so culture is hugely important. And I always say, I'm going to backtrack a little bit and just contradict what I said. I always thought there was nothing more important than culture until we switched from 24/48s to 48/96. And since we've done that work schedule, I've had a few of my rock star members that have said, Chief, if we go back to 24/48s, we're going to go leave somewhere else. So schedule trumps culture, but there's not much more above culture. So it's just hugely important. And to put it at the most basic definition, culture is simply what the organization values. And there's organizational culture. There's subcultures, which are shifts, battalions, and supervisors. Then there's microcultures, which are fire companies, firehouses, and specialty teams. And so you got a choice. Every organization has a culture. There's not an organization in existence that does not have a culture. So the leadership in those organizations have a choice. They're going to either accept the culture that will exist and hope it's a good one and tend to it and cultivate it and try to make it positive, or commit to a chosen culture. In the colony, I like to say we're pursuing a high performance learning culture. We're about training, we're about building on experiences, and we're about high performance fire companies, meaning that we want to be better than average. So to me, it's hugely important. And I can be in a firehouse for 45 seconds and have just a very little bit of conversation and tell you what the culture is. So it's that important. And, like I say, you got to be careful who's out there talking about it and who's selling their goods, because it is kind of a fad thing. I started submitting culture articles to FDIC back in 2003, 2004. And I remember Bobby at the time saying, man, the fire service isn't ready for that. So wow. I've been thinking about it for a long time, but yeah, it's kind of the fad in thing now. But culture, we got a search culture, a truck culture, a crew first culture, a culture of extinguishment, a safety first culture. Culture impacts everything that we do in our organization.
So how
probably more of an answer than you wanted.
No, I told you I love talking about culture because I think it's amazing. And I'll tell you why. So you'd mentioned earlier that you go, well, culture is so important. These people, you haven't lost anybody for a long time except for that hiccup because of culture. You attribute it to the culture. So I'm really interested in generational stuff when it comes to firefighters. So I'm the Gen Xer, right? So Gen Xers, one of the things is, like we would value a good workplace over money. We don't want to change jobs a whole bunch. We want a nice place to work and enjoy ourselves. We would take that more than money. So why I'm bringing that up is because culture. If you have a good culture and people aren't leaving, then that is valuable. It is so valuable because, you can always make a little bit more money here or maybe a little bit better there, more benefits. But if you like being at work, which is really the core of the fire department. When I first came in the fire department almost 30 years ago, it was like I loved going to work. There were times I couldn't wait to go to work. Well, of course, I was married to my first wife then, so I think there's a reason for that. But it still had a little bit something to do with fire shit.
Right.
But I really think culture is important. So me personally, I'm on this journey. I'm navigating culture. And the problem is, like we talked about, people are over here saying culture. People are over here saying culture. And I don't think culture is this subjective thing. I'm trying to find where it's an objective thing, where it's something that I can actually hold on to and study and make my department better, make any department better if I get to go by there. But I think culture is so overlooked in the sense you're talking about it. It's overlooked as if you could have it, great. But if not, you're still a fireman. But so where does the chief of the department play into keeping that culture or making that culture good? What do you do every day to do it?
Do we have a few minutes to take a little bit of a deep dive? Or are we on a hard stop at an hour here?
No, we're not in a hard stop at all, sir. Okay. Thompson in front of me. Yeah, I'm good.
So I mentioned the levels, and I'll take that. I'll expand that a little more. So the macro culture is the American Fire Service, and you've got a shirt on there that I can see that has a Maltese cross, right? We have things, our speaking trumpets on our collar, the bells on our rigs. Those are all things we adopt from the fire service macro organizational culture. Then I talked about our individual organizational cultures, your department to my department. Then goes right on down the line as subculture to micro. So that's important. So if you really want to understand a culture, the first indicator of what the culture values and the first indicator if the culture is changing, you hear in conversation. And we're going to call these espoused values and beliefs. So there's internal and external. So there's something where, and I'm going to go back to the supervisory subculture. You were a company officer, I'm going to assume, before you were a battalion chief.
No, sir. Right? No, sir. Okay. I went from back to training officer. That's why I always say I'm a training officer, not chief.
Well, so let's talk about a company officer. So as supervisors in an organization, whether you have one firehouse or 150 firehouses, and I'm a captain, a lieutenant, or even a shift commander, there's things that we do every day. There's rituals and the routines that aren't addressed in policies, procedures, or operating guidelines. That's part of the culture. Then there's going outside and you talk to people and you ask them about this organization. It's kind of what they perceive from the outside. So culture all really defines the things we believe in, how we view ourselves, how people view us, how things get done, the rituals, the routines, the symbols, all those things. So you can make culture very, very complex. But really, what you got to focus on, and let's just say in a firehouse that you have an engine and a truck, and you want to modify that micro culture. It's about what you value, what's important to us, and that's really what you kind of focus on. So, like I said, and not as much now because we've become a much bigger organization, and I hate that this is an excuse, but I don't get in the firehouses near as much as I used to. But you can kind of go in and you can kind of get a feel for what's going on. Now, there's the first indicator you're going to see is morale, right? We've all heard that word. Morale is high, morale is low, blah, blah, blah. And morale can be fixed pretty quickly. Morale can get ruined pretty fast, get fixed pretty quick. The next is the climate. And that's what I'm talking about. I can go into a firehouse and separating out morale issues. The climate is a snapshot of the culture at any given time. And so there's always these signs and symptoms. If you kind of know what you're looking for, then you can kind of see what your culture values. Like I love company logos, and if Engine 11 wants to have a little different ball cap and a little different T-shirt than Engine 12, and they've earned that, I'm okay with that. At Station 1, we put all our fires up on a brick wall. We have an old brick wall, and they write all their fires up there. What are the pictures that they're hanging in the firehouse? Are they pictures of their fires? And every one of them has a story. All those things talk about what your culture values. So it's just, like I say, I started out kind of minimalizing it, but it's really pretty complex. You can change the culture if you want to, but it takes time. It takes patience. It takes 18 to 24 to 36 months to kind of change it in the fire service. I'm not talking about for the private sector. So that's kind of the cliff notes on culture. I don't know if I answered your question, but I talked all around it.
You absolutely did. And for me, so all this 3-point firefighter podcast and my little side business and all that came from, it all started with a search. I was trying to find my way into leadership. I just struggled with finding, I was reading Lasky and Brunacini, and I was reading, all these other people. But the thing about it was their experiences, right? So I was thinking leadership was a science, but it's not. It's an art. And when I realized that, I had to find how I was going to paint that picture. And so it ended up being an article I wrote called Being a 3-Point Firefighter. So for me, to dip your toe into leadership, it should start with being a good example. And exampleship for me was pride, training, physical fitness. If you worked on those three things every single day, you got better. So that's where this came from. So the way, and the reason I talk about a long way to go somewhere, that's how I'm hearing you talk about this, is like, you've got to find your way in. But again, it's whose responsibility is it though? So you talk about the micro, the macro, Whose responsibility is it? Do you think that leaders have a stronger responsibility to uphold the culture, or do you think it's an individual? For example, morale. I think morale to a point is on you. If somebody makes you feel bad, you can sort of control that a little bit. I mean, somebody might be a jerk, but only person that can make you feel something is you, right? And it takes practice, but that doesn't seem to be it for culture. So what am I missing?
Well, yes and no, and fire chiefs, there's a lot of mouths. I ain't responsible for morale. Mm-hmm. You are responsible for how you react to the things that the chief does. But if I'm in charge of where the money goes, if I'm in charge of what policies get pushed out there, if I really design how people are recognized and how people are disciplined, I hugely impact morale. Right? Mm-hmm. What you're really controlling is how you respond to it. But a fire chief can jack stuff up in a hurry and drive good people into the ground in a heartbeat, right? So that's kind of part of it. But culture is going to exist if we do nothing. If we do absolutely nothing, there's going to be a culture. So the attention here is in the details. In my program, my very first car was a Chevelle SS 396, a big block motor with a 4-speed transmission. I wish I still had it. 400 plus horsepower. But I talk about I had a Holley 4-barrel carburetor that I was constantly messing with, trying to get just a little more horsepower. It was either running too rich or too lean. So culture is to the organization as character is to an individual. Does that kind of make sense?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's all right. You punched me in the gut with that one.
Well, that's how I look at it. Now, I don't know if academia will agree with me, but that's how kind of I view it. And then I talk about, culture kind of also being the personality, if you will, of an organization. It's kind of the big thing. And so, that's just kind of how I look at it. But it is a huge, huge influence in any organization. And we can change it if we want, but role model is a big part of it. So when I have 8 steps that I talk about in changing the culture, and one of those steps is you got to live it. If you're the leader and you want to actively change the culture, you got to believe it and live in it, or nobody else is gonna. And so that is very important. I can't say I want a chosen culture that's a high performance learning culture if I don't value training and recognizing high performance fire companies. If our policies, if our disciplinary stuff, if our recognition go against that or contradict that, then our culture is just a fairy tale. There's nothing true about it. So it's really what you live day to day.
That's so true. I had a officer way back in the day, and I remember he would always say, it's not my job to do it. It's my job to see it gets done. And I remember hearing that, and I'm thinking that just grated against me. I'm like, you're supposed to be the example. You're supposed to be the leader. You're supposed to show me the way, and you're just showing me lazy. And that, I guess Chiefs could be the same way.
Oh, absolutely. We love those terms. We look for ways to get out of responsibilities. I love that Chiefs say, well, fires are down. We're an EMS department that occasionally goes to fires. Now, I get what they're saying. That may be reality, but those words coming out of my mouth do nothing but demotivate a motivated firefighter, right? They're like,
right.
We're looking for more excuses to fight less fire than justification to fight more fire. And with the Firefighter Rescue Survey, with what Don Abbott's done with Project Mayday, with what UL, FDNY, and NIST have done with the firefighter dynamics, firefighter research studies, there is so much data out there right now that we can really almost get surgical with our operations. I'm a big proponent of positional firefighting. We kind of have all these things we're going to address prior to pulling up on scene. And so I think with the information, the data, the stuff we have out there, we can become much more surgical, certainly much more tactical on how we deal with problems in the firehouse and how we deal with problems on the fire ground.
Man, that's amazing. That's amazing. See, I get a nice class from you, and I didn't have to pay a dime. Not even a dime.
Well, a lot of that's opinion, and I'll be the first to admit that these are theories that have been tested and true, and a lot of it's opinion. It's just kind of how I look at the world from my position, but I believe very strongly in it. I would not say anything carelessly or recklessly if I didn't try to live by it. I don't always succeed. I make a lot of mistakes, but at the beginning of each day, that's kind of where my sights are set.
Tell you what, this has been amazing. I got a couple things I want to do to wrap up, but I would love to know, what was the best firehouse prank that was played on you or you played on somebody?
Now, this is very elementary. It's not going to mess anybody unless I put it in context. So when I was a fireman in Plano, I got married to my first wife. Very, very nice young lady, and this is my first marriage. And so as we started dating was my first night in the firehouse. So they did the bedwetting trick where they took the IV bag and they put it in my bed. Not a big deal unless you're a newlywed and you got to go home and tell your wife or your fiance at the time that you're a bedwetter and you never knew about it. So the joke itself, that happens in firehouses across America. But the stress of this was me trying to explain to I don't remember if we were married yet or we engaged, but I had to go home and say, dear, you need to sit down. Apparently I'm a habitual bedwetter. And so that went on for a while. And I remember one night I was in a special ops company. We ran 2 engines. And it was a guy in the engine that was busting my chops, and he's passed since. But I remember laying in bed. We just got back from a fire, and all of a sudden I feel myself getting wet. And I'm like going, oh, okay, I guess this isn't. But for 2 or 3 nights I would jump up and throw my linens in the washer and dryer. I didn't say a word about it because I didn't want anybody. So they got me really good. I know there's nothing crazy about that prank, but they got me to the best of that.
Honey, I may be a habitual bedwetter.
Oh, I did. I had that conversation. I said, listen, I may have to start wearing Depends. I don't know what to tell you. Apparently I had a peeing problem. I was convinced. That's not a conversation you want to have in your first week of marriage. Yeah. So there I love it.
I love when a joke takes on its own life. It goes further than they expected. That's awesome.
I'll tell you one other prank. Okay. I'll tell you one other prank that was pretty good. I worked with a great group of guys. They were very senior, and I was the first rookie that they got, and because it was special ops. And so I got on and I bought a new truck. It was a Toyota Crew Cab 4-wheel drive. And again, we had 2 engines. And in Plano, the city did this thing where they gave out these cards for trash for your yard debris. So on Saturdays and Sundays, you could come by the firehouse, give them this card you mail out. And we had to give them these debris bags to put their leaves in. So we would get several hundred people on a Sunday or Saturday come into our firehouse. It was a real pain in the ass. So we go out. I bought this brand new truck, and so we go out on a fire call, and we're gone for a couple hours. Well, we come back to the firehouse, and there's a line of people as far as you can see. Well, one of the guys on the engine had took my new truck, and they moved it out on the apron, and they put for sale for like $200. It was like ridiculously cheap, and people were in line with cash and their checkbook in hand. And as soon as I stepped off the rig, they like swarmed me, going, I want it. I had to say, no, it's not for sale. Yeah, so
$200.
Yeah, it was something ridiculous. It was like, I don't know. Back then, I bought the truck probably in the late '80s. It probably cost me $17,000 or $20,000. I think maybe $500, $200. It was a great deal. And like I say, there were, I don't know, 40, 50, 60 people in line wanting to buy it.
And how'd you get them back?
Well, I just say it's not for sale. I said, hey, understand. I work in a firehouse with a bunch of asses, apparently.
I love it. I love that, Chief. So I appreciate your time tonight. I knew this was going to be a good one. I was really excited about it. I was about 5 minutes into it, and I was like, dude, I get why everybody loves some Chief Scott Thompson. You care about the department. You're sending a message out there. You're setting an example for all of us to follow, brother. Thank
I
you
got
for
some great people.
everything you do.
I got some great
Hey, you know
people.
what? I've never met somebody that's awesome and it said, you know what, I am awesome. They always want to say somebody else, and that's great. Yeah, that's great. Now I know you go and you teach a lot. I know you have a website. I know that book. I'm buying the book. Promise you. Right. So tell us where are they going to find you when people want to see you out there in the great US of A. Where can we find you?
Oh gosh, I'm at LaPorte, Texas next weekend, which is down by Houston, and I'm at FDIC. I'm at I think I'm going back to Pensacola. I'm doing a deal with Rob Fisher in Washington for the young fire officers. Then I'm at the Texas A&M Municipal Fire School. I think I'm doing Brad Clark, the 350 line this year. So I'm just I got a full-time job though, so I got to be kind of careful. Most of my stuff is flying out late Friday and coming back Sunday, but that's where I am. I'm in Columbus, Ohio in August. I'm doing something with Brian Brush and iChiefs. So just a few things going on. I was in Mansfield on Monday, had a great time, but that's kind of where I am. I'm doing a workshop at FDIC.
Okay, tell me about that. What are you doing?
I'm doing the Functional Fire Company. I can't remember off the top of my head if I do Monday or Tuesday. That's all I do. All my hour and 45-minute classes never get accepted. I always get accepted for a workshop for the last 10 years. So I'm either doing a 4-hour. I think I'm doing a 4-hour afternoon on Tuesday, but I'm doing the Functional Fire Company at FDIC, and then I'll be in the booth signing books and be spending the week there. So hopefully,
nice. I'll be
time.
Up there too. I'll track you down.
Absolutely, we'll have a beer or bourbon or a burger or whatever.
Yes, no, yes.
Okay.
I'm from Kentucky, but I drink bourbon. My wife does. I can't do it. So one last thing, your book. Please tell everybody where they can get your book.
So it's the Functional Fire Company, Positioning Small Groups for Success and Survival, and it's put out by Fire Engineering and Clarion. So really, I used to sell them off my website. I don't anymore. But you can go to Fire Engineering Books and Videos, and Josh and the gang, Holly and Josh, and they will take care of you. It's still pretty expensive. It's $69. The book's been out now for 4 years. I'm hoping the price would come down a little bit, but it's going to cost a little bit of money. But if you're totally not satisfied, I don't know if I'll do a full money back guarantee, but I'll certainly try to make it right. But that's really the best place to get. I'm going to be doing the firefighter book club. I think it's next month, so we'll get into the book a little bit. We'll talk about it and give you some insight on that.
Chief, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on. This is fun, and I love these, and I love having the conversation. So thank you.
Stay safe, brother. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, brothers and sisters, for listening to my podcast. Please help me make our community stronger by liking and subscribing to the podcast and YouTube channel. Also, please join my private Facebook group called 3 Point Firefighter. Also, be sure to check out my TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. That's where I pretty much just goof around and try to make some funny videos that make me laugh. Hopefully, it'll make you laugh too. Now, my ultimate goal is to bring us all together to make the fire service better through pride, training, and physical fitness. Stay safe, and remember, we feel bad for astronauts and fighter pilots because they are not firefighters. Today's podcast was sponsored by Fire Facilities, designers and manufacturers of realistic, built-to-last training structures and mobile units for 30 years. Make training count. Visit firefacilities.com for more information.